Tonight, the White House was illuminated for a Hanukkah celebration, a moment that is historically reserved for tradition, reflection, and a sense of shared national dignity. But if you were looking for a commander-in-chief focused on the solemnity of the occasion or the weight of his office, the reality was starkly different. What the world witnessed instead was a rambling, disjointed discourse that veered from $400 million ballrooms and 5-inch thick glass to a bizarre imitation of stealth bombers dropping bombs in the dark of night. To the casual observer, this might appear to be just another eccentric performance in a long line of unconventional speeches. However, for those of us who track the health of our legal and political institutions, what happened tonight is a five-alarm fire for the rule of law. This is not merely a story about a lack of focus or a leader having an off night. It is about a visible, public unraveling of the administrative discipline and institutional respect required to lead a global superpower. We are currently witnessing a convergence of three massive interconnected events that signal a deep fracturing within the executive branch. First, we have an unprecedented public rebuke of the president by one of his most loyal allies, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Second, we saw an erratic, incoherent performance in front of a religious gathering that raised serious questions about the mental and professional state of the presidency. And third, and perhaps most importantly from a legal perspective, we have a staggering admission from the White House Chief of Staff that could effectively dismantle the Department of Justice's current legal strategies and lead to a wave of dismissed federal cases. When the people closest to the center of power begin using words like classless below the office and retribution in on the record interviews, the legal foundations of the administration do not just crack, they begin to fall apart in real time. In this video, we are going to dive deep into the specific details that the 24-hour news cycle often misses. We are going to examine the actual transcript of tonight's events and analyze why Susie Wiles' recent interview with Vanity Fair is a goldmine for defense attorneys across the country. We are also going to look at how the lame duck season has officially started years earlier than anyone anticipated, changing the power dynamics in Washington overnight. I am Daniel Kershaw, an independent legal and political journalist. I do not work for any party, any campaign, or any government agency. My role here is to remain objective and follow the facts, the court filings, and the Constitution, wherever they lead. The central question we must face tonight is a fundamental one. Is the American executive branch still functioning as a predictable office of law, or has it devolved into a personal fiefdom where the rules of evidence, conduct, and institutional decorum no longer apply? This question is not just academic. It affects the stability of our markets, the safety of our legal system, and the trust that you as a citizen can place in your government. Stay with me because there is one specific quote from the Chief of Staff regarding the concept of selective prosecution that could result in major federal cases being tossed out of court entirely. We will analyze that line by line as we move forward. To understand the chaos of tonight's Hanukkah speech, we have to look back at the events of the last 48 hours. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has arguably been the most loyal soldier in the MAGA movement for years, went on CNN and did something we have never seen her do. She drew a hard public line between herself and the president. The catalyst for this split was a social media post targeting the family of Rob Reiner following a deeply personal and tragic loss. Greene did not mince words during her interview. She called the president's statement classless and stated that it was completely below the office of the President of the United States. Now, why does this matter to you as a taxpayer or a voter? For years, the narrative has been that this political movement is an unbreakable monolith, a single unit that moves in total unison. But what Greene is signaling is the beginning of what we call the 2026 campaign phase. Politicians are survivalists by nature. When they see the executive branch losing its grip on reality or focusing on personal vendettas instead of policy, they move to protect their own political futures. Greene pointed out that just last week, 13 Republicans voted with Democrats to overturn an executive order regarding the firing of federal workers. This is a massive shift from loyalty to the man to loyalty to the self. It shows that the fear of a primary challenge is being outweighed by the fear of being associated with an administration that is perceived as unraveling. But while Greene was busy distancing herself from the president's personality, The president himself was providing more evidence for her critique during the White House ballroom event. The details of that speech were even more bizarre than the headline suggested. During what was supposed to be a Hanukkah dinner, the president pivoted almost immediately into a grievance-filled rant about a lawsuit involving a $400 million ballroom project. He claimed that he and anonymous donors are giving this building to the government for free. He bragged about glass windows that are impenetrable by anything but a howitzer and insisted that he always builds under budget and ahead of schedule. If you're a homeowner paying a mortgage or someone who looks at your tax bill every month, you have to ask yourself about the logistics of these donated buildings. In federal law, there is no such thing as a truly free gift of this magnitude. Who pays for the staffing of this new ballroom? Who provides the 24/7 Secret Service security for a structure that is designed to house billionaires and corporate executives? When billionaires fund projects on White House grounds in exchange for massive tax cuts or political access, it creates a significant conflict of interest. As a legal analyst, I look at this and see a bypass of the traditional appropriations process that Congress uses to oversee how the White House is maintained. This is not just a gift, it is a monument to ego that bypasses the transparency requirements that usually govern federal construction. The speech then took a turn into the truly surreal when the president began describing military technology. He attempted to explain the mechanics of stealth planes, but instead of using strategic or technical language, he began imitating the sound of bombs being released as bing, 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 bong, bing. He claimed that planes become totally unstealth the moment the bomb shoots open, which is a simplified and somewhat confusing take on complex military aviation. For any of us who care about national security, this kind of rhetoric is deeply troubling. The President of the United States is the person who has access to the nuclear codes and receives the most sensitive intelligence on the planet. When the Commander-in-Chief's communication style shifts from strategic defense to cartoon sound effects at a religious event, it raises legitimate questions about mental fatigue and professional competence. This is not a partisan observation, it is an institutional one. Predictability at the top is a requirement for a stable global order, and what we saw tonight was the opposite of predictable. However, as distracting as the ballroom comments and the bomb sound effects were, the real damage to the administration's legal standing did not happen in that room. It happened in a quiet, incredibly revealing interview that Susie Wiles gave to Vanity Fair. Wiles is the White House Chief of Staff, the person credited with bringing order to the administration's operations. Yet she gave an interview that might be the single biggest legal blunder of the year. In the interview, she discussed the administration's enemies list and the ongoing plans for retribution. When asked specifically about New York Attorney General Letitia James, Wiles said that it might be the one retribution. Let us be very clear about what that word means in a court of law. In the American legal system, the government is prohibited from prosecuting a citizen out of personal spite or political revenge. This is a concept known as selective prosecution, and it is a direct violation of the Due Process Clause found in the 5th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution. By using the word retribution on the record, the Chief of Staff has essentially handed a massive legal defense to every person on that enemies list. Any defense lawyer representing James Comey, Letitia James, or others can now walk into a federal courtroom, hold up a copy of that magazine, and argue that the government's own chief of staff admitted the motive was revenge, not the law. This admission creates a situation where the Department of Justice's cases are now tainted by the perception of political bias. If you are someone who believes in a system that plays fair, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, the idea of a high-ranking government official admitting to using the power of the state for score settling should be deeply concerning. This is precisely the kind of executive overreach that the founders sought to prevent when they created the system of checks and balances. The law is supposed to be a shield for the innocent and a sword for justice, not a personal weapon for whoever happens to hold the keys to the White House at that moment. If you are still with me, I want to emphasize how this internal collapse affects your daily sense of legal and economic security. We are seeing a movement that is fracturing from the inside out. When you have the Chief of Staff admitting to retribution, the most prominent congresswoman calling the president classless, and the president himself drifting into incoherent tangents about Lu Fao windows, you have a vacuum of leadership. Elon Musk's involvement through the Department of Government Efficiency has become what the transcript describes as politically radioactive. The economy is currently facing significant challenges, and military tensions are high in several regions across the globe. Instead of a focused and disciplined executive branch, we have a leadership team that is seemingly venting their frustrations to reporters because the internal chaos has become unmanageable. Susie Wiles even admitted in the interview that there was a loose agreement to stop the score settling within the first 90 days of the administration. However, she also admitted that the president failed to meet that deadline. This is a staggering confirmation that the primary focus of this administration is not your grocery prices, your job security, or the stability of your community. Instead, it is an internal, ongoing battle over who gets to use the power of the federal government to punish their political enemies. This kind of distraction at the highest levels of government has real-world consequences for every American. It leads to stalled legislation, inconsistent foreign policy, and a legal system that feels increasingly arbitrary. To summarize the situation we have analyzed today, there are three key takeaways that we must consider. First, the political shield provided by the party in Congress is thinning rapidly. When Marjorie Taylor Greene stops defending the president's character and starts calling him out for being classless, it indicates that the core base of support is no longer a guaranteed safety net. Second, the president's focus has drifted away from the complex mechanics of governing a nation and toward extravagant construction projects and personal grievances. And third, and most importantly for the future of the legal system, the chief of staff has potentially sabotaged the government's own legal cases by admitting that retribution is a primary motivating factor in executive policy. This is not just another story about political drama or media headlines. At its core, this is a conflict between the rule of law and personal whim. If the office of the president can be used as a tool for personal vengeance, and if the staff is willing to admit it to the public, then the very definition of American justice is being redefined. I know that following this daily stream of chaos can be exhausting. It feels like a full-time job just to keep track of who is suing whom and which official said what on the record. But the reason we look at these transcripts and these magazine interviews is because these people are public servants. They work for us. When they treat the White House like a personal stage for a ballroom project and the Department of Justice like a private collection agency for grudges, it is our constitutional system that pays the ultimate price. I want to hear your thoughts on this situation. Does it worry you when the people running the country openly admit that retribution is part of the executive plan? Or do you see this as just another example of the intense polarization in modern American politics? Do you believe that a $400 million ballroom funded by billionaires is a generous gift to the nation? Or is it a distraction from the real issues facing your family and your wallet? Let us have a serious and respectful conversation in the comments section below. I am interested in hearing how these developments affect your view of the legal system and the future of the country. If you value this kind of independent, fact-based analysis that avoids the screaming matches and focuses on the actual legal and political implications of current events, please consider subscribing to this channel. My commitment is to stay here every day, digging through the documents, the court filings, and the transcripts that the mainstream media often overlooks. We need to stay informed and stay focused on the principles that keep this country stable. The events tonight at the White House are a reminder that power, when left unchecked by institutional discipline, can quickly become erratic. When the language of the presidency shifts from the serious to the surreal, it is the responsibility of the citizens and the independent press to demand clarity and accountability. The transition from a government of laws to a government of personality is a dangerous one, and we are seeing the symptoms of that transition in real time. We must continue to watch the timeline, read the filings, and remind those in power that they are bound by the same Constitution as everyone else. I am Daniel Kershaw. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Stay informed, stay objective, and stay sharp.